Okay. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, my voice is loud and clear. Is the world alive inside our eyes? What is the relationship of conscious experience with unconscious experience? Today, I was walking downtown. I've been busy these couple days, and also a bit off in regards to health wise. But I was walking and I was suddenly fascinated by this idea. I was just like while I was walking downtown, I suddenly realized the world that I started off is different than the world I'm in now. And I realized how much of the world is being colored by my inner dimensions and my sense of acceptance of how the world was earlier. So it was a very fascinating moment that I suddenly noticed the world that I opened my eyes in, the realities that I found myself as a child inside those reality simulations. In other words, when I would open my eyes as a kid and then suddenly it would translate into meaning. I suddenly felt a stranger to myself when I was uh, downtown. And I wondered for a while, why? How can I be a stranger to myself? And I realized the inner reality is drawing in the world. And you can hear that sentence in two ways. It's pulling the world towards itself, or it's also animating it. And so it was this very cool moment where I realized there was an attention is required to how the inner child or how the child that the being was developed, and it's very fascinating because when I think about emotions, if I have an emotion in this moment, I don't consider this emotion as from this moment only. Emotions are different than thoughts come and go. It's like whack-a-mole. Thoughts are like whack-a-mole. They just pop their head out and you like see them and you can vocalize them or not. But when it comes to the architecture of the individual as it opened its eyes in this world, that architecture has been kind of too, it's as if like if the simulation of reality is a puppet, it's being puppeteered from both within and without. And the external phenomena, what's in front of your eyes, is being puppeteered by the laws of nature, the laws of cosmos, or as in ancient times, not in ancient times, but as they saw the cosmos as a room, when people, ah, when people looked at the world, they probably were contemplating it from a state of finding shelter. And when you find shelter, it's as if you have found a box in a river. It's as if you found a ship in a river. And what I mean by that is that it's as if like every person. Uh, how can I say this? It's like teachings can be extracted from changing forms or changeless observance of form. there is something inbuilt, I've built in um our intelligence as a human being, where we require to not only maintain the outer realms but the inner realms. And it's much more easier to confront something changing externally because you have reference for it, but it's much harder to change something internally. You know, it's like externally, it's like imagine a coloring book, the outline of this coloring book. Reality is multi-local. That means that the person has access to memories from various moments of their life. You know, just it's like in stillness and silence, or after a person cultivates experiential observance of existence, they can notice it. How it's as if behind our eyes, it's not just one thought at a time. You know, sometimes when a profound emotion has hit me, it's as if either a subjective projection from a visualization of the future, or a sort of subjective recording of a memory, are colliding with how the moment is constituted. If The poet Rumi has this very incredible quote. He says, "Your task is not to seek love, to find love, but it's to get rid of all the barriers you have made against it." And for me, the experience of some sort, or let me say it like this, an experiential truth is the various barriers or various inner interpretations of the external realm. So you can say, if knowledge is something, imagine if knowledge was stuff, and when you knew something, you were given that stuff, and we were wondering, how is this stuff being held? It is actually being held by space. That means I find it's like the chicken and the egg situation, but it's like uh, the chicken is the external reality, the egg is the inner reality. It's the simultaneity of the presence of dimensions. The cool thing is, every person has an unknown, and sometimes I've kind of compared what I know with what I don't know. I do it often. There was a time in my youth where what I didn't know, I didn't like. I didn't like when I didn't know something. And of course, being raised in Persian culture, the masculine archetype is like, I know everything. Are you kidding? But it became a joy. It became the things that were kind of before I was interpreting as shortcomings or inefficiencies, suddenly became efficient once the mystery was open, once there was more space for what had happened to me to mean something else. And so it's kind of like becoming acquainted with outer space and inner space, and also becoming acquainted with the phenomena that is in the outer space and the inner space. And I found a remarkable relationship here, guys, that it is external, the spaces of external reality and inner reality are codependent. That means you need physical space to have subjective phenomena in it, and you need subjective space to be able to consider the object. Pretty much our civilization, when you look at our history, what has it been? It's as if people have pulled out ideology like lottery tickets, and they're like, I got it. I got the truth. It's in my hand. And the persons ran with it. But the beautiful thing about life is, when we consider it as creatures of perception, we have to acknowledge the unknown. The unknown is something incredibly beautiful, but its beauty is not known. Its beauty is in its dynamic continuity. I've kind of realized, I want to kind of turn up these lectures a notch by sharing a bit more of my inner realms with the audience, the experiences behind my eyes mainly. Because usually when I speak, I consider an audience that 100% knows what I'm talking about, and an audience who 100% doesn't know what I'm talking about. You know, that's the cool thing of not just speaking to a person, not conceiving personalities, but speaking to ears as vast as the world. That means there has been times even I've given talks where I felt it was like an interdimensional audience. What I wanted to share was a kind how certain archetypes were remembered. You know, people feel like you can only get archetypes because we treat the child's mind as a blank slate. But what I find is actually going on, it's kind of like this. It's like imagine you're a Buddhist and you're getting old, and somebody comes and tells you, you know, you imagine you're a Buddhist, and somebody comes and tells you, hey man, you know, you're getting old. What are you gonna do? And the guy's like, I'm not getting old. I'm getting younger. And then the person's like, what do you mean? He's like, next life, I'm gonna be a baby. In my school of thought, I, to sum it up, pretty much what I feel like is the core of what I'm telling people is that you're a pilot of your consciousness. This pilot finds itself like a pilot on an airplane in a plane of existence. This plane of existence, like an airplane, has two wings. One of these wings is the known, one of these wings is the unknown. You can interpret it other way, as if one of these wings is the chaos, one of these wings is the order. I consider this the dualistic dimension, so that a plane of existence, in order to become animate, requires dualistic reference points, requires something to not change for us to notice something is changing. If everything was changing, it would be very hard to define reality. So it's kind of like our minds are moving faster than our bodies, and so our body is becoming our reference of individualism. But ultimately, it's a unique relationship because it is so easy to prove an object of its existence. You bring the object, you're like, here man, look at this object, see, this is evidence. You're seeing it, you're looking at it, you're touching it, you're seeing this object from various angles. But if somebody said, hey man, can you bring your mind and put it on the table, you'll see you cannot. At most, maybe you can write the effect of the unknown presence of your mind, which is externalizations through language, through art, through action and movement. So when we suddenly realize there's something going on that we cannot dualistically refer to, that is pretty much where the mystical quest begins. And the mystical quest is kind of a riddle that says, if there was no duality, what would truth be like? And ultimately, you will see that in all, what I'm saying, I consider to be universal to all esoteric societies. They are either worshiping the empty, or they are worshiping the infinite. That is it. Esoteric societies in the West, they're going towards infinity. They want they want to kind of be masters of their own heaven. But in when you look at the Eastern esoteric kind of movements, their movements were very, how can I tell you, they weren't looking for power. It's as if like in one angle somebody wanted to evolve the vehicle they were driving in, change the car. You know, in another manner, in Eastern esotericism, it was as if the person's like, all right, I'm leaving this car, rather than updating it and trying to attain that infinite maximized potential of it. You know, rather than getting that blessing from the deity beyond, behind the veil, from the lords of karma, it's as if it's like it's realizing, why is the car even there? This world is vast, and in its vastness the laws become multidimensional, and multidimensionality's edge is, it tends to be usually a singular image behind the self. That means everything I am saying to you, every image that is arising behind my eyes, because ultimately I have noticed that it's either self changing in the world or world changing. So either your sense of self changes or your world changes. If you physically go to a new environment, you know, then your world has changed and it's changing your sense of self. If you are in an environment and suddenly you change, your inner sense of self changes, then it's as if you will notice your approach and behavior in the external different. So I find this to be a very useful approach where the person in every moment is wondering, what is the self doing? What is the world doing? How is the self being the world? How is the world being the self? You know, I remember the name Mr. Within. I don't know why. It was something strange that when I first came up with that idea, Mr. Within, it was, how can I tell you? It's as if I was in a point where, and we have a man by the name of Aldous Huxley who tells us there are things known and things unknown. And in between are the doors of perception. And Mr. Within is considering that door of perception is a revolving door. It's a revolving door. You're oscillating between the known and the unknown. You will never find something in this life that will be 100% known and 100 how can I say it? It's the same way we say, if a tree falls in a forest and there is no one to see it, did the tree fall? I believe it was Nietzsche who came up with that notion. But anyways, it's the idea that if there isn't anyone in the room, does anything happen in the room? And that's the codependence of the known and the unknown in perception. We have Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, an Indian mystic from a totally different part of the world than Aldous Huxley, and he says, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see that I am everything, that is love. And in between, my life moves. And so we are a movement between the known and unknown. And Mr. Within is saying that for the first time, our species is evolved to such a capacity that it can pilot the environment. And it must begin by piloting the inner environment. So you got to think about it. It's like you can go externally look at yourself in the mirror, but how would you see your mind in the mirror? And the mind comes across as a dynamic field of intelligence. At least this is how I have experienced it. That it's like the higher dimensions are not identity oriented, they're not dualistic. They transcend the language threshold and are kind of invisible winds of intelligence. So, right now for the human being, we're saying creatures are intelligent, creatures that are separate from the earth that are walking. For example, the insect kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdoms. In Vedic thought, in Vedanta, Vedanta, by the way, Advaita and Vedanta is a school of non-duality. Pretty much, it's another way of simplifying the external realm to an attributeless inner presence. That attributeless inner presence is there, but it cannot be put into shape. It cannot be put into a box. So pretty much, there's an aspect to your moment right now that is too dynamic to be shaped. It's like the hand moving the pen, and everything that the person sees as external reality is just the ink on the empty page, but the person cannot see the hand that is moving the pen. The hand that is moving the pen is not some sort of singular divine agency, and at the same time, it's not a kind of how can I say it? I mean, you cannot have the singular exist without the multidimensional and the void. I mean, technically, you can have the singular exist with just the void, but you cannot have the dualistic exist without the void and the singular. I've had chaotic inner visions and ordered inner visions. Whenever I see chaos, a greater chaos than the one I harbor within, I see that I feel like the order in the moment. When I see something more intense than my free will has animated, I feel like I'm the order. When I see that there is something more ordered, more simpler than me in the moment, I automatically identify as the chaos. And so I can say, like, you see a little kid, that little kid compared to kids older than him is not chaotic, is ordered. But when you see that little kid and the kid smaller than that little kid can harbor the potential of chaos for that younger kid. So ultimately, life is not just the external relationship you find yourself in, just the material objective component, but it's the subjectivity. And it's kind of like your mind is like the hand again moving the pen, which is the body. Now, why is the hand moving? Why is all this occurring? And this is where there could be two explanations. One, there is an explanation. We can explain it, but we don't know yet. Two, it cannot be explained by our current language technology, our inner technologies. That means don't think it's just external technologies that need to be updated. Your inner realms require to be updated. Every day, as much as your body hungers for food and survival, your mind is hungering for the expansion of its inner vision. So for me, it's like an achievement of the inner realms is seeing something new about the day that you didn't see yesterday. And that advancement of the external realm is pretty much maintenance and continuity. And so if we consider, think of how cool and amazing and incredible the idea of evolution will become if we are not just evolving in one dimension of our interpretation. There are multiple angles of change. The chaotic vision I saw in my inner realm was that I felt there. I'm gonna say it, even though it may be chaotic to some, but language is never like when you observe language, it can't touch you. When you think you're a language, when you think you're an idea, oh, every idea will touch you. Everything anybody says will change you. But when you begin to live as a presence in the moment, and this doesn't mean not changing. I mean, inevitably everything changes in this life. It's just that in the present, in the moment of our present attention, it's like an invisible hand, like we see in economics. You know, what was the man's name? How do I forget this? I forget the person who wrote the book, The Wealth of Nations. What was his name? Yeah, I forget it. But anyways, just like how there are, you can say the weather is like an, okay, let me just simplify this. External reality is like an invisible hand if it's defining your conditions. But if you see from your inner realms, you can redefine the external conditions, then the invisible hand is in your inner realms. And ultimately, we're beams of attention in the darkness of matter. That means if you just in one moment were curious about, okay, so if I'm a creature that its mind and story and sense of being a character in a world is all dualistic, then let me wonder what would be the most ordered self that I am, and what would be the most chaotic self. And before I finish this, I'm going to tell you the vision I had. I had this very strange vision that Earth is not Earth. It's this rock that has nothing on it, and there are these giant spheres that are moving on the surface of this rock, and they are simulating dimensions of Earth internally. That means beyond. How can I tell you? There's only one person, one thing I've come across in everything I've scoped from the beginning of my life till now. That there was one picture, and I don't know who drew it, but it was back in the day. Um, where the person's head was outside of this half sphere. And outside of this half sphere, it was a lifeless superior dimension of intelligence. When I say lifeless, that means this is a strange thing, but it's very hard to say if geometry that moves without the person's mind moving it, if it's alive or not. That means it's like our definition of life here. Let me bring Swami dictionary here for you. let's see what being alive means, as the dictionary would say. So it's an adjective of person, animal, or plant living, not dead. Hopes, not having interest and meaning, aware of and interested in, alive with, swarming or teeming with. So you see, guys, it's pretty much it's like, let me see how the dictionary defines the word animated. Okay, animated, full of life or excited, lively, made using animation techniques. Okay, so the dictionary is needs to read a bunch of books. It's as if how can we know what is animate without defining inanimate? And I think if we give a numerical value to death to be 0, then the value of life is 1 and higher. 0.1 and higher. Right now, this room I'm in, this physical room I'm in, all the stuff I see in this room, from the computer screen to my phone to my body, honestly, in this moment when I ask myself, where is all this happening? Where is the instantaneous knowing that all this is here? And when I close my eyes, certain uh, data of the moment becomes absent. And so life is like an eye that opens, that is open. I would define being alive as eyes that are open, or you can say sight that is active. One can reach a moment where their sight becomes inactive, but then they become the image. So it's like right now, kind of like how a caterpillar goes into a metamorphosis and becomes a butterfly. I feel like it's like a creature that is limited to two-dimensional movement, then becomes a creature after becoming a butterfly has access to three-dimensional space. So I find right now we are before the veil of our transition out of this plane of existence. Before, if death was seen as the cocoon, we are being a self inside a world. I feel beyond our eyes, and as we transition beyond this plane of existence, we will be the world for the self. And this means that this is kind of maybe a bit of an intense idea, but it means that after a person potentially dies, they become the world in which that is in the minds of people. I feel there's a shift between collective experience and individual experience. So right now we are a self in a world. We may become worlds in the self, the world in the self. That means if you as a human being have an ability to identify as an individual, that means you have seen everything and you have noticed you're separate from it. So now imagine you see everything and realize you're not separate from it. Who would you be? How would you be? What character would the whole cosmos have? That means if the whole cosmos, or the question would be, could the whole cosmos have an ego? And you see, in the 6th century, they were like, yeah, man, it does. The ego is God. God is the ego of the cosmos. It is the personification of the movement of all phenomenology, of known phenomenology and unknown experience. So you can say in the 6th century, or certain especially monotheistic religions, they gave a personality to the unknown. They made the unknown alive behind their eyes. The external unknown became alive behind their eyes. The human being is an opportunity, is an energetic opportunity. I remember sometimes, the concept of the logos is not welcomed by Western culture because they consider that ever since psychology held the microphone for what the unknown looks like, psychologists began looking at people and thinking that people have to be individuals all the time. They didn't realize we're oscillating between the two dimensions of collectivity and individuality. So it's like I've seen this in often, sometimes even when I was listening, like for me, psychology was fascinating since a kid. Like when I was 11, I knew the definition of psychology. Like it was I had an interest to comprehend that. It's as if like when I was younger, I had the perception that there was a soul, but I felt I was just being it, so I felt I couldn't do anything about it or have an opinion on it. How can you have an opinion on something that's just being there regardless of whatever you do? So the presence of my attention is the soul of all the phenomenology that I witness through that attention. And I consider personally my attention to be attributeless. That means I've tried. I've sat down, you don't know how many days it was me and the empty page and just me observing existence. Like, what is going on here? What is going on here? What is the existential condition? What is the experiential condition? What are these definitions? And once you have a sort of I call this I've written the subtitle "Mystery of Existence Unravel for You." That mystery of existence will have an intensity that you will suddenly have to put aside all archetypes, so that for the sake of being able to really see what's going on, to not have the bias. The inner realms are, I don't want to say they're tricky, but they're like, if you go in with an intention, you may get limited to your intentions. So it's another way of saying your opinions limit your sight. And you can, if I so it's another way of saying, would an opinionless person experience more of life than a person who has an opinion? The person who is preferenceless will be aware of more preferences than the person who's predominantly prefers one way for things to be. This doesn't mean the person shouldn't exert their individual free will. It just means that the roots of free will are the willingness of how the overall system is being in one moment. It's another way of saying, why do we have minds to be uh, the awareness of the cosmos, to be the fingertips of the unknown, the fingers of knowledge. It's like, I remember in one of my earlier talks I used this metaphor where I said it's like, imagine putting your fingers in a swimming pool or putting your fingers in a pond. Now, from in the from underneath the surface of the water, if you were going to look, you would suddenly see the entrance of individuals in a new space. And you would kind of see like most of your body is outside of the water, but the fingertips are in the material dimension. And this is why, for me, the concept of future selves and past lives, where you don't know how many people I've seen in this world bring up that idea, um, it became not meaningless. It became not the last staircase of heaven. It became something important, like to consider. It's an ancient idea, reincarnation, or kind of seeing how the way you're living now is creating your life. If you considered incarnation, I realized, how can I know my past and my future fully if what I am considering to be the visible me, basically the law of boredom. When a person gets bored, that means the self cannot, does no longer, it's like the self has seen everything that's in the room. And that's when evolution occurs. If you still have desires of what's in the room, that means you still want to be in the room. It's like getting reacquainted with your experiential presence rather than your existential personality, or how you're personifying or personalizing your existence for yourself. Yeah, it's like being conscious of the space in the room or before movement. Like this is something where there were certain martial artists that they acknowledged the space. They went to even certain rooms and they honored the space in the room. It wasn't just matter. It's like the person wasn't just worshiping the god of form, was also conscious of the formless. So in other words, what I'm saying is being aware of the space in the room. And now I'm saying your attention is being the space for every thought you have ever had. And if you become attentive to this, as Sadhguru very playfully says, he says, if you get a glimpse, a drop of the divinity that you are, which in other words, it means an unknown, uh, undescribable presence. If you just realize simplicity is the god of complexity, and complexity is the god of simplicity, and the loop will continue as long as you search that way. Let me tell you what I feel is the greatest meditation practice or thing that technique that a person can do. It's letting go of the weapon in your hand, which is ultimately how the inner realms forcefully, because the inner realms are afraid of the outer realms, they have to make the outer realms similar to the inner realms. This is why the more you freak out a person, the less they are open-minded. Any time there is a sense of being pushed, the person holds their guard. Imagine like a huge wind is hitting you. What do? You lunge. You stand in that lunging formation, and then kind of, letting the wind pass through. So in other words, when something that the person identifies with gets pushed, the immediate response is to hold on to something or to stabilize. This stabilization can become extreme, and I feel this is what political correctness is. It is the pushing of people in their inner realms, and people have not observed that they are not thoughts yet. And I blame the poets and the philosophers. And let me tell you why I blame them. Because they let sometimes in life you'll notice that the greatest meaning of it is how much there was an effort that could have been done, that can be done, and the person just exerts it. And I feel unless the person is honest, evolution cannot occur. Any sort of advancement that the dishonest person gets will not be even considered, will not be retained, which is sad. You know, that's the saddest thing. That if you live artificially in a world that is real, you will not receive the real. And so it was as if, kind of on one angle, as a child, it was hearing the voice of others and what they had to say, and then realizing, wait a minute, where's my voice? Anyways, guys, I need a quick intermission. I'll be back in a couple minutes. And for the two people that are viewing, bless you and thank you for listening. I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay. All right, everyone. I'm back. By the way, at any point, due to the nature of this being a live stream, um, feel free to share. These Mr. Within talks were birthed with me alone, kind of sitting in nature, kind of recording my phone. So this being a live stream, feel free, whoever's listening, to comment or share anything or help even stretch the content at hand. So, what can we do with the whole world being alive in our inner realms? If it's purely internal, if the inner realms, or let me say, if reality is an inner projection, then attention defines it. If it's an outer projection, it's already defined. It's on some level looking at nature and seeing everything is working together, and even in a secular way, seeing all the laws of nature, right? And then when one tries to fathom how it came about, it is so big. The world that we are in is so big that ultimately any sort of response or answer or definition to some sort of truth of it will be limited. So we can say we are measuring the cosmos in, if we made the persona into a unit, in units of identity, and let's call it persona. So this is a cool thing. I don't think it's been done before. Maybe it has, but if Carl Jung was here, I would kind of tell him that the persona can be seen as a measurement. In other words, you cannot measure with a ruler the vastness of the physical realm, and similarly with a persona, you cannot measure. You cannot see the amount of your personalities can be endless, or the experience can be void from the beginning. You can be the space where all matter is moving, or you can be just a certain part of your moment. The free will that man has is not just a free will to move in one dimension. I feel it is a, when it comes to the free will of the inner realms, it's how attention can evoke anything. So it's either the higher dimensions are made and we're just not there, or we have to build the paradises that we want to enter. And what does this building constitute? Does it constitute just physical decision making? Does it constitute internal observance? Does it constitute abidance with the nature of the witness of the whole moment? So, when I say witness of the whole moment, imagine you as a kid and you went into a room where it was very, like, I'm saying, imagine, like maybe you're 8. Imagine being 8 years old and suddenly going into a room where various adults are having very intense conversations. Even though greater meaning and stuff is being communicated in the room, the child has a certain access to it, but ultimately can distinguish the presence, the importance of the presence of importance, like how that what is animating the movements in a room is originating from the inner realms of people. When somebody asks a person, "How are you doing?" doesn't it seem like the person is has to create the condition they're in verbally to communicate? There is a creative relationship with between the known and the unknown, and it's playful. I say it's playful because we can't tell. So what that means is what looks what we see in a two-dimensional reality is very different than what we see in a three-dimensional reality. So if we're in a two-dimensional reality, I'm just playfully entertaining what I'm saying here. If we were in a two-dimensional reality, how could we comprehend the movements of three-dimensional phenomena? And this is what I'm saying, that all our educational systems, all the professors, all the degrees on the walls of human beings are two-dimensional achievements. And what if there's the third? What if what we know now is nothing compared to what is actually going on? There has been moments in this life where um, I've asked people for something, for example, like an address or whatever or something, and then, or I don't know how to tell you, some things I've asked, the person's response I trusted, but some moments I distrusted. And I noticed that really what you can tell is they say the eyes are a gate to the soul, a window to the soul. I will tell you, the eyes are they show the inner strength of the human being. And the inner strength of the human being is how much the unknown can move in knowledge, or whatever you know can confront the unknown. So for me, the strongest man in the world is not the one who lifts up the greatest weight. The strongest being is the being who has confronted the chaos and the order. What that means is you look at this person, and as they're aging in life, you're like, why isn't this person freaking out? And you see, it's as if the person has a contentment. They have been acquainted with the unknown presence of the experiencer they are. And when you learn from yourself, you're actually learning from the self of selves, that space where all sensory perception is being processed. Mr. Within is saying, for the first time in our history as human beings, it is no longer just important to explore the outer. We must explore the inner realms. And the inner realms cannot be solidified in a certain language. What that means is our language is evolving as much as we are, if we're choosing to identify with the language. And I have been in many environments. How can I tell you? The way society is designed is that it is tribal. We are living. It's like hunter-gatherer societies, now advanced. You know, much advanced. Something I noticed: every child is being told a story, then their intelligence reacts to that story. And that reaction will be either an acceptance or, in some sense, an inner dissonance of rejection. What that means is it's like being true to what you as a human being like and dislike, but after a while realizing how preferences change like the seasons, and then you suddenly become content, and you notice that what is very crucial for the human being is emotional stability. So one thing that really changed: before, when I would speak to people when I was younger, I wanted to be something in the moment. Then I realized, if I want to be something, everybody wants to be something. And so, what is the superior gaze of the moment? I call this, every moment has a genius vision. Any moment, guys, hear me on this. Any moment you are existing in, whatever condition the mind processes, you can sit still and silent. And if you sit still and silent and observant and look at the situation again as if you're opening your eyes for the first time, you will see greater dimensions to it. It's like just like in, for example, dating and relationships. The person goes into a relationship and is not just going into a relationship of a physical nature only. They're going into a relationship with the mind of that other being. And so if you think of where a lot of relationships are evolving to, they evolve into marriage. And what is the concept of marriage? It is two minds that have chosen to exist in the same moment, in the same space of value. So just like how drops of water merge in the windshield, you can say the inner identity of human beings wants to find itself part of a collaborative, collective space. Then, guys, my mind took things too deep. Sometimes my attention makes me laugh, because I'm looking at something simple, then I suddenly see an unnecessarily complex angle to it. And so I want my mind in that, how can I say it, when I was wondering about this idea of the inner experiencer and the identity, I saw it's a relationship ultimately with the species. So it's like, it's not just enough for people to fall in love with people. It is now becoming necessary to fall in love with the world that you're in once again. So, what is that love for the world? I mean, you can say loving a person is easy, but how do you love a world? Well, you start off by realizing that everything that you see, it's like every person you have seen, their sense of self is being influenced by a world of their own interpretation. So you can kind of notice that any person, like for example, any um, person who has fallen in love with someone else, it's as if uh, they have fallen in love with their a collective archetype. They have fallen in love with not just who that other person is, but the world that their personality is in. The mind can be said to be vision. That means it was like evolution was occurring, and then it's like the mind came and ta-da, vision, conscious vision has been provided. For me, I realize the evolution of love leads to action. That means when you see something you care about, you don't just go towards it, you also work for it. You know, you want to become a part of that. Now, if we consider that children are being born, so look at the planet as if the planet is, every time a person dies, it's like a hair on the head of the planet falling. And every time a person is born, it's like hair growing on the planet. And if the planet was to comb its hair, that combing, how the comb would direct the direction of the hair, or it's kind of like how the laws of the cosmos are combing the earth's hair. In other words, civilization is getting orientation. I want to, a part of me kind of had this glimpse, this inner glimpse of a civilization where a type of earth where the child is born, and if you were to take statistics of how much people are depressed, there would be no time for depression. It's as if when your civilization starts being victorious, just imagine. Right now, I don't know what those people in power are doing, but it's hilarious. It's like the greatest comedy is how the civilization is being governed. The first comedy, the first joke is that we are on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and we have attributed symbols, and we have made different groups, right? So right now, the person, if you tell them who are you, they'll be like, I'm a person from this part of the world, and this is where I live, and this is what I do. And so what it is ownership of land is still linked with identity. And because we're identifying with chunks of land, it means the borders can't go away. Because if the borders went away and there were no nations, suddenly what would be your identity? Who would you be? You know? So the thing is, for me, it's like, think about it. Imagine we couldn't live on the surface of the planet, and we were, my science fiction, I called it sky cities. Imagine we have made these sky cities and we're living in the orbit of our planet. Then all the people who are living in the orbit of the planet suddenly are like, okay, we send they send these ships down to Earth, and imagine these ships extract resources. The person would see there is so much resources on Earth that if we were living in our orbit and we didn't have national borders, all the resources of the Earth could be shared. Could be shared. Do you understand? Because it is not no longer our space, it is accessible to everybody. So for me, nationalism was so crucial for the inner development of the human being. I have, on some level, without nationalism in history, languages wouldn't evolve. So the evolution of language required nationalism. But the thing is that it's becoming a resource game. And it's kind of strange, on some level, you look at the illusion and you're like, what if the illusion is correct? What if the illusion shouldn't awaken? What if the person who's sleeping should remain asleep? And on another level, you kind of look at it and why should the person remain asleep? We have created a story out of energy. So energy being a story equals human personality. That means if I consider I'm an energetic being, I'm energy right now, like within my atoms, within my cells of my body, there is energy, and everything is energy. Then to be energy that is aware of itself is conscious energy. And so if there's a definition to energy that can't be created and destroyed, we can hilariously say the concept of the soul is conscious energy scientifically. It's energy that is aware that it is energy. So it is energy looking at itself. So, dear listener, right now you're energy looking at itself. It's all about how we're interpreting the unknown, guys. Every living human being is interpreting the unknown. They're interpreting it with the experiences they have accumulated. They will eventually notice the experiences they have accumulated, like how Robert M. Pirsig says. It's like we've taken a sand from this endless beach and we're called of natural experiential rhythms of knowing. So you see, we say we have this impression and this idea that a person knows something or learned something based on, like, it's as if like the thing is how can I say it? Imagine the teacher comes in class, the teacher says, kids, look at the blackboard, and then kids are looking at the blackboard and writes ideas and draws symbols, and the kids see these ideas, write them down in their notes, and they try to remember the exact thing. So that's a way of knowing things in the past, from the past. But to know things with the vision of the future, it would be like, instead of the child going to a blackboard, it's as if the teacher coming in, not caring if the students are listening or not, and just performing. The teacher's like, I'm alive once, my moment matters to me. So the teacher comes in, doesn't hold back, and tries to overwhelm the student. So the student recognizes that their own definition has a limit, which is self-contained. The teacher is not there to take the box off the head of the student. The teacher is there to say how he has taken off the box off his head. Because every person's vision harbors within it something that nature requires. And when you understand that there is, let me say, what would be different is that the child sees the performance of this teacher, and then goes in the yard, and imagine at that point, nature is everywhere. Like, it's not just cities and streets. I had this ideology even that we should make schools in glass, what do you call it? Glass schools with glass walls in nature, like in a forest. So the teacher's teaching in this glass room and a bear suddenly comes. You know? But the students see the bear outside of the glass walls of this, you know, glass school. The kid would hear the performance of the teacher, then the kid would go in nature, close his eyes, and try to see what it means. This is why I say, parents, especially if you have young kids, you should ask questions from your kids. Not too deep. Don't ask too deep questions. You have to adjust to the reality of the child. So ask a simple question and let the child make it complex. So for me, the most important thing is that in a child's development is questions to ask. When I kind of wondered if I had a time machine and I would go back, all the things that I was unaware of, could have come in that moment and said, why do you think this is like this? How do you see this object? How do you see people? How do you see things? And you'll get fascinated because children's eyes before very young children, they don't hold back. That means if children young, like, there was a time I thought, like, all these kids that are playing video games, if there was a sort of digital war, you know where human beings, imagine there was an extraterrestrial invasion or something, some forces against the human being. The human being realizes the biological body is temporary, so the human beings create giant robots to defend the Earth from aliens. Imagine. I don't know. There might be a movie like that. Maybe there isn't. I don't know. If there isn't, somebody should make it. Life is a moment to behold with wonder. I feel in this life, the greatest emotion I have experienced was fascination of the unknown. Nothing else compares to that. Even it's superior than being loved. Being loved is something, especially in our current world, which is uh, the way civilization is designed. It's highly unlovable. But but when you love your world, you are indirectly loving how your whole mind is being your moment. And imagine when you become fascinated with the world, you're becoming fascinated with how your mind is being your whole moment. You free civilization from its objective relationship into attention's mysterious presence. This is why I wondered, how could death lead to fear? I mean, I understand it can, but for me, there is also such an unknown dimension of what will happen next that it's as if, like, for me, it's like a door. Transition out of this plane of existence is like the pilot suddenly realizing last second, all right, Maha Samadhi, in my school of thought, for the pilot of consciousness, is when the pilot ejects out of the plane. Or you can say a life can be completed when the pilot lands the plane of existence and steps out of the plane. It's like after the destination, the airplane pilot, after he reaches the destination, it's like the whole world claps, thanks for navigating existence, and then the pilot leaves and probably goes to some, high advanced lounge. There was someone named Rama, a sort of deity and embodiment of the perfect archetype of a man in Indian culture, Rama. So in other words, Rama is the divine man. You can think of it, the archetype of the divine man. You know, the God man, God dash man. You know, or the man God. I think God man sounds better. What I mean is awareness. I find that in every moment, uh, I might be going on a bit of a tangent here, but I feel this is important to share, maybe more important to share. There is an emotional component, and you can say it's an individual processing a collective system, and it's an individual view processing a collective view, and it's a collective view processing an individual view. And the definition can be linearized, but there's a lot of nonlinear things that happen in this existence. And when we banish, exile the nonlinearity from our scope of knowledge, that is the first, that's the death of the educational system. When you are putting more ideas from the past than new ideas into the mind of people, it's like, how can I tell you? Sometimes freedom is looking at a subject from a different degree. Just like, again, an object, you can look at it 360 degrees, you know? Think of looking at the subject that you believe in from a different degree of experiential presence. So what does this mean? Not only your memory, like imagine you experienced something and it became a memory for you. Not only you have access to that memory, but you have access to endless degrees of how that memory will become malleable over time. Every time you remember something, you change that memory. You change the emotional reception of that memory. And of course, it's strange because it's like, how can I remember something from the past in a new moment? Body is like the solid state, like ice. Yeah, our minds are like liquids. You know, our minds are fluid. They're flexible. You know, and what I consider to be the consciousness or the awareness before even a sort of containment, it is gas. So you see, you can touch steam and you can touch ice, but when it comes to holding steam, it's like good luck. In trying to define the soul, good luck. You know, the soul is, it's like the unknown variable. It's not meant to have a shape. It is how all shapes are in the shapeless. But the body is how the shapeless is in the shape. So you can say the difference between a materialist and an immaterialist is that the materialist is saying matter first, then whatever, and the immaterialist is saying space first, then whatever. So I guess I can. I'll share one story and then conclude the talk, guys, because I feel I've flown over the points I wanted to cross. The story is the story of these two monks. And so there's this junior monk that has entered monk school, entered the monastery. And he's trying to do everything like exactly how the headmaster monks wanted, you know, the senior monks wanted. And so all the junior monks that have joined this monk school, they're ascribed to a senior monk. And the senior monk that's ascribed to this junior monk in the story, the main guy, main junior monk, the senior monk comes and says, let's go for a walk. and they go for for the silent walk to town. Now the junior monk is trying to do things perfectly. He's trying to live up to this senior monk's vision, and so he's trying to copy the senior monk. As these two are going, he's trying to exactly even walk like him, do everything like him. As they walk, they suddenly see this very beautiful woman, and there's this stream, and this woman is just staring at this stream. And suddenly the junior monk sees this woman and sees, okay, there's a problem here. But the junior monk's like, okay, we're monks. Like, what are we gonna do? We can't even help her. Probably she wants to get across the stream, and we're not allowed to touch her. So the junior monk is still walking, and then, as the junior monk is walking, looking ahead in the road, suddenly he looks to his left and sees the senior monk has stopped. The senior monk has stopped and has gone and speaks to this beautiful lady, and the beautiful lady says, "I need to get across the stream, and could you help me?" And the monk picks up the lady very, very elegantly with a smile. He picks up the lady, takes her across the stream, puts her down, and the lady says, "Thank you," and she leaves. And the senior monk comes back, and the junior monk is like, "What? What? What the?" The junior monk is like internally like, "Whoa, I'm trying to act like this guy. This guy just broke the basic code of monks." And so 20 minutes goes by, the kid's holding this in. The kid's like, even he's no longer paying attention to walk like the monk or whatever. And the senior monk notices this, but he doesn't say anything. And so they walk. 20 minutes later, after this, the junior monk stops, and the senior monk's like kind of expected this, and looks at this junior monk, and the senior monk says, "What is it?" The junior monk says, "Sir, we as monks have renounced material desires. We have taken vows, and how could you touch that woman? How could you carry her and pick her up and, you know, put her on the other side? How can you touch her?" This kid who has been raised in this renunciate mindset, he's like, how? He's like, so. And this is the moral of the story, guys. The senior monk looks at him and says, "I picked her up in that moment, and I dropped her and I put her on the other side of the river. I carried her and I put her on the other side of the river. You have been carrying her for 20 minutes in your mind." And the kid gets shocks. He gets goosebumps. He realizes on what level of caliber of vision, these monks are working with. And so what it was the inner holding of the idea would led to the perversion. But when you live moment to moment, perversion doesn't exist, because the self is not the same self. It's kind of how Heraclitus says, no man steps in the same river twice, and it's not the same man, and it is not the same river. This kid became aware of his inner realms, of his subjective realms, and how he doesn't have to hold on to it, how it comes and goes, how the awareness to change is a profound source of ability, because you get to see what's happening and then move. So that's why I'm saying, when I communication at first, I didn't like it because it felt robotic. But then I realized it's something that the intelligence is piloting through in the moment. And when you pilot, you see ahead and then move. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. The mysteries of existence are right here. And so the world is alive inside your eyes in such a way that it's making the outside animate. So the outside is alive within, and the within is happening outside. Life is incredible. And hopefully, I definitely see it, that our civilization will reach a point, hopefully I'm alive to see that. But if not, it's still okay, because I know that it will. It just needs it needs to be watered. It's like civilization is like a plant, and the less it's watered by human beings caring for it, it will go dry. And a civilization going dry is its symptoms are cruelty, because cruelty is the inferior mind's success. To take, to shake and be victorious, that is no victory. That is the child crying for a toy, you know? So a lot of the most ruthless conquerors and tyrants of this world were children. Their inner child was crying for a toy that it felt it was authorized to have. But there is a freedom. There is a freedom to discovering the natural simplicity of your presence. Sometimes, for me, I'll tell you, I I understand so many people are seeking happiness, but sometimes I've experienced the greatest joy by stopping whatever I was doing in the day, closing my eyes, and just listening to how my breathing naturally balanced itself. Just listening to how I'm breathing, how I'm alive right now. You know, to be honest, I felt it didn't matter where in the world I would be born in. It was like it's so fascinating to be alive, and we take this for granted, and we deny ourselves subjectively greater experiences of the objective realm. And unless we can observe the subjective realm and see that what we observe we are not, so it's as if like I think the evolution of language beyond the language threshold. I don't know how long. I mean, I feel it's evolution beyond the language threshold. I'm definitely not going to be here for that. I think none of us are going to be here for that. But like, but for now, it's like the evolution beyond the language threshold would mean a silent civilization. What I mean by silence is that it's, imagine if we were all telepathic, we wouldn't need to speak. Our inner realms were just present, right? We're connected. This is also kind of like how in the future, if they, uh, or let me say it like this, we even have an example of this right now. In a multiplayer online video game, you can see that it's the imagination of the players that is moving, deciding. It's the free will of every player to move with the character in that virtual kind of state, right? In the video game digital, in that digital cyberspace kind of, in the game's existence, right? So in that multiplayer online game, another player from another world who moves a character, it's strangely like telepathic. You are seeing how they're what they want to move, how their mind moves. It's like you can't see their body, but you can see how their thoughts are moving in the video game, right? You can't see the person sitting behind the computer screen, but you can see how the person's inner realms are moving in the digital space. So a civilization beyond the language threshold would mean we will no longer be people. The human species is being conducted by a field of intelligence. We will evolve into, again, as I say, the world moving the self. We will be the field of intelligence moving the particle rather than the particle thinking that its free will is the movement of the field. There is something very humbling to realize intelligence transcends your subjective realm. I've realized this. This is why it's like kind of like acknowledging the silence before you speak. You use this if the silence doesn't bother you, it doesn't matter how long it goes. It doesn't matter how life happens. You are acknowledging the space where the phenomenology is occurring in. If you're comfortable with the space, the phenomena would be comfortable with itself, with how it moves. If you're not comfortable with the absence of what you are, you will also not be comfortable with the fullness of what you are. So this is why emptiness was a very fundamental core idea in Zen and Buddhism, and in many mystical traditions. That the empty is nothing to fear. It's an effort of awareness to study the relationship of awareness with self and self with awareness, because ultimately we are creatures of self-awareness. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was helpful. And I'm going to start saying this. Anybody, like, I want to bring back this thing of writing letters. So, anybody who wants to get in touch with me, you can write letters, emails. because an email is most incredible, the best way I can respond to people. Rather, Anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.